I wish you'd never been born. The words hung in the air like shrapnel, sharp, jagged, and impossible to unhear. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway of her son's kitchen, her grocery bag slipping from her fingers. Apples rolled across the linoleum, one bumping against David's worn work boots. He didn't move, didn't look at her, just stared out the rain-streaked window, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitch beneath his stubble. She'd come to drop off his favorite apple pie, homemade, just like his grandmother used to make, and maybe stay for dinner. She'd even brought wine. But the moment she walked in, the argument was already boiling over. Something about money, something about responsibility, something about how he never grew up. And then those words. I wish you'd never been born. Not from her. Never from her. She'd spent 28 years loving that boy through scraped knees, teenage rebellion, a DUI at 19, a broken engagement, 2 job losses, and the quiet grief of his father's funeral. She'd held him when he sobbed into her shoulder at age 30, whispering, I don't know how to be a man, Mom. And now, at 58, she stood in his kitchen, feeling like a trespasser in her own child's life. David finally turned. His eyes, so like his father's, were red-rimmed, exhausted. Mom, I didn't mean. Don't, she said, voice low but steady. Don't take it back. If you meant it, own it. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. I was angry. You were yelling again about the mortgage, about how I should have listened like I'm still 16 and forgot to take out the trash. I was worried, she said quietly. Your sister told me the bank called. Again. He flinched. So you two are talking behind my back now? No, Margaret said, bending slowly to pick up the apples. Her knees protested arthritis. The doctor called it. She called me, David. Because she's scared for you. We both are. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. The rain drummed against the roof. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Margaret straightened, clutching the pie box like a shield. I'll leave the pie on the counter. It's still warm. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. Wait. She didn't turn around. I didn't mean it, he said, voice cracking. Not really. I feel like I'm drowning, and every time you show up, it's with another life raft made of guilt. She turned then. Guilt? David, I brought you pie. And a lecture wrapped in cinnamon, he shot back, but there was less heat in it now. You always do. Eat, you're too thin. Why aren't you married? Your cousin just bought a house in Boulder. It's never just pie, Mom. It's never just love. Margaret felt the sting behind her eyes. She'd raised him to be honest, to speak his truth, never imagining that truth might one day cut her deeper than any stranger's cruelty. I don't know how else to show I care, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Your father, he knew how to just be there. I only know how to do. Fix. Push. Nag. It's all I've got. David exhaled, long and slow. He walked over, picked up the fallen grocery bag, and set it on the counter. Then he opened the pie box. The scent of brown sugar and nutmeg filled the room. I know, he said. And I'm sorry I said that. I was frustrated with the bank, with my job, with myself. Not with you. She nodded, but the wound was still raw. He cut 2 slices, handed her a fork. Stay, please. She hesitated, then sat. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the scrape of forks against plates and the soft patter of rain. You know, David said finally, when I was 8, and I broke my arm falling out of that oak tree behind the house. You stayed up all night just watching me sleep. You thought I might stop breathing. Margaret smiled faintly. I was terrified. I remember waking up and seeing you in the chair, half asleep, holding my hand. I pretended to be asleep so you'd stay. Her throat tightened. I never told you that, he said, because I didn't want you to think I needed you that much. Even then. Oh, honey, she whispered. I do need you, he admitted, looking at her now, really looking. Just, not the way you think. Not the fixing. Just you. Sitting here. Eating pie. Not asking about my 401k. She laughed a wet, shaky sound. I can try. You've been trying your whole life, he said. Maybe it's my turn. The truth was, Margaret had been wrestling with this for years. Ever since David turned 30 and still hadn't settled down, as her bridge club friends put it. Ever since he chose freelance graphic design over a real job with benefits. Ever since he moved back to their hometown after his startup failed, renting a small bungalow instead of buying a house like his peers. She told herself she was just being practical, responsible, a good mother. But deep down, she feared she was becoming the kind of parent she'd always despised, controlling, judgmental, unable to let go. And David? He'd spent his adult life trying to prove he wasn't the disappointment he sensed in her sighs and sideways glances. Every success felt hollow if it didn't earn her approval. Every failure felt like confirmation that he'd never be enough. It wasn't uncommon, this dance between aging parents and adult children. Across America, millions of families were locked in similar battles over politics, money, grandchildren, caregiving, inheritance, or simply the unspoken expectation that love should look a certain way. But love doesn't come with an instruction manual. And neither does aging. Margaret had lost her own mother 5 years ago, and only then realized how much she'd taken for granted: the Sunday calls, the gentle teasing, the quiet pride in her eyes. She'd promised herself she wouldn't make the same mistakes. And yet, here she was, pushing her son away with the very hands that once rocked him to sleep. David, for his part, had spent years blaming her for his insecurities. But lately, he'd begun to see the fear beneath her criticism, the fear of losing him, of becoming irrelevant, of dying alone. He'd seen it in the way she lingered at his door, in the extra groceries she just happened to buy, in the way she saved every article he'd ever published online. They were both trying. Just badly. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Margaret stopped asking about his finances. Instead, she asked about his latest design project, a logo for a local animal shelter. She even offered to help him photograph the dogs for the website. David, in turn, started calling her just to talk about nothing important. The weather. A funny thing his neighbor's parrot said. A recipe he tried that failed spectacularly. One Saturday morning, he showed up at her house with 2 cups of coffee and a toolbox. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the tools. "You mentioned your porch step was loose," he said. "Thought I'd take a look." She hadn't mentioned it in months. But he remembered. As he worked, hammering nails with the same concentration he'd had as a boy building model airplanes, she watched from the kitchen window. Her heart felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Later, over iced tea, he said, "I've been thinking, maybe I should get a more stable job. Not because you want me to, but because I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck." She didn't cheer. Didn't say, "I told you so." She just nodded. "Whatever makes you feel secure, David. That's what matters." He smiled. "Thanks, Mom." The real turning point came 3 months later, on a crisp October evening. Margaret had fallen in the garden, nothing serious, just a bruised hip and a sprained wrist, but David had rushed over the moment she called, panic in his voice. At the urgent care clinic, as they waited for x-rays, he held her hand tightly. "You scared me," he admitted. "I'm fine," she said, squeezing back. "No," he said. "You're not fine. None of us are. We're all just doing our best." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who broke his arm, not the man who said those terrible words, but her son. Flawed. Trying. Hers. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied. "Even when I'm an idiot." She laughed. Especially then. They never talked about that day in the kitchen again. But they didn't need to. The apology lived in the space between them, in shared meals, in late-night calls, in the way he now hugged her a little longer when he left. Margaret learned that love at this stage of life isn't about shaping your child into who you want them to be. It's about accepting who they've become and trusting that your love helped them get there, even if the path wasn't what you imagined. And David learned that his mother's nagging wasn't control. It was care, clumsy and imperfect, but real. And that sometimes, the people who love us most are the ones we hurt the deepest, and the ones most willing to forgive. Because family isn't about perfect harmony. It's about showing up again and again, even after the worst words are spoken. especially then. Years later, when Margaret's grandchildren asked about the old pie dish in the cabinet, the one with the tiny chip on the rim, David would smile and say, "That's the dish Grandma used the day we almost broke each other and put ourselves back together." And Margaret, sitting nearby in her favorite chair, would nod, eyes glistening, and whisper, "Best pie I ever made."